And we're starting in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to the Insightful Journal. I'm Dr. Lawrence Robinson, and today we have a very special guest. We have the brother of Marvin Gaye, who's going to be talking about a book that he wrote called When a Man Exhales, a memoir from the brother of Marvin Gaye. Welcome to the Insightful Journal. I read your book. I went on Kindle and I downloaded it, and I think I got through the first chapter. I read the introduction and so forth. A very interesting read. There are many similarities between your book and what I do. I'm a addiction psychiatrist. And
Oh,
what
wow.
I do is I specialize in people who are addicted to drugs. Mostly these days it's opiates. And I have a license to prescribe Suboxone or buprenorphine, which is a drug that many people use in order to avoid having an overdose or having withdrawal symptoms from the opioid. So I could mostly understand, what you were talking about. My background, of course, is a lot different than yours, but I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation because what we are really looking at is we're looking at your search for purpose and understanding. And hopefully we'll come out of this with the hope and the how you change, your transformation. And I think that
Yes.
our readers are going to know this and they want to know about this. So please
Yeah.
just tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, your relationship with Marvin Gaye, and how you came up with the idea or the thought of writing this book.
Thank you. First, thank you for having me, and it's a blessing to be here. I am Antwaun Gaye. I am the brother of Marvin Gaye, and we had the same father, Marvin Gaye Sr. And anyone knows a little bit of the story of how Marvin left this earth tragically. It was through and by the hands of our father. And so I am so my book, When a Man Exhales, it touches on what it was like being a family secret, touch on meeting my father and the differences and similarities of my father and Marvin, and what it was like being a black male in America, trying to figure out who I am, dealing with, again, the traumas that were happening to me at an early age, and how I just dealt with trying to find out who I was and the different things that happened to me along the way, as other traumas and hurts and pains that happened to me as I went into adulthood. But I'm a minister. I'm a former law enforcement officer, correctional officer, therapeutic mentor, probation officer, basketball coach, trainer. I've been working with at-risk youth and adults most of my life. So part of the book was to write my story in hopes to help others who have dealt with some type of trauma, pain, uh, rejection, all the things that can come at us and make us feel like giving up and losing hope. And hopefully that someone would be encouraged and know that God can write a new chapter in our life. And of course, I dealt with addiction that I didn't see coming, and how that impacted my life, my marriage, my children, and ministry. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's a story that we hear, often, and many times when we're in a situation where we can't cope with the situation, we look for a crutch or we look for something. And unfortunately, because people don't have other supports, maybe family structures, God, the church, whatever it is, they turn to drugs in order to get that. And it gives you a short term feeling, But the problem is, it's not really the solution to your problem. And what happens is, after a while, then it becomes your problem, and it doesn't become your solution. I had a good
Yes.
friend once, a man named Sam Evans, and he told me, he said, the secret to controlling your life is very simple. He says, everybody has problems, it has difficulties in their life, but the secret is to keep from multiplying them. So
Mm,
if you have one problem, don't make another problem out of it. And many
yes. Yes.
times when we try to address the problems that we have, we create new problems. We multiply our
Yes.
problems. That's where you
Yes.
have a problem, because there's no way you're going to avoid having problems. That's part of life. You
That's
know,
right.
you're going to have your ups,
Right.
you're going to have your downs, you're going to have your loves, you're going to have your disappointments, you're going to have your betrayals. That's part of our life. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, unfortunately, it's the human condition.
No,
But we
absolutely.
have to be strong enough and to deal with our issues, and not to change them so that they become multiple issues. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
uh, I think that that's one of the things that we can learn, you know, from this. And it's
Yeah.
very simple, you know. We have to deal with what it is that we have. We can't be in a state where we deny it, or, you know, say, oh, well, I'm going to bury my head, or I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to just go and get high. And, you know, I'll worry about that tomorrow. You know, we got to
Yeah.
get actively involved in terms of dealing with it. One of the things I say as a psychiatrist as well is that, you know, mental illness is one of the greatest health problems that we have here in America. And I actually have related it to violence as well. So, you
Mm,
know, right here in Philadelphia now, we're having a major violence epidemic. I think just the last weekend we had like maybe like 10 people shot or something like that in just one
mm,
day. You know, I mean, the numbers are huge. And so what we've said is that violence is a public health issue. Okay,
yes, it
it's
is.
not a criminal justice issue. You could have as many
That's right.
police, you could have as many
Yep.
courts, you could have as many judges. That's not the problem. You know, it's a mental health problem. You know, and it's a disease. It's a disease just like cancer, heart disease, whatever. It's a disease. Okay, and if we're going to be effective in dealing with it, we have to approach it from that standpoint. One of
Gotcha.
the things about our criminal justice system is that it's a punishment based system. It's just like our medical system, you know, it's a
Yeah.
disease system. So we don't even interface with people until they become diseased or, you know, or have illness. But
Mhm.
we have to change that system so that we deal with that. So I know that you have taken some strategies. I'd like to hear about some of the strategies that you took in order to deal with the issues that you were going through.
Well, one thing is for sure is being a Christian, being raised in a Christian household, and then having a personal relationship with the Lord myself, as far as um, my faith. Um, my faith, and you can hear it a lot of times, even in the testimonies in religious circles of gospel singers and pastors, and testimonies of people that if it wasn't for God, I would have lost my mind. You know, and so it is truly faith, and the church has been that which has helped me. Uh, you know, my faith in the Lord, and reading the scriptures, and actually reading and seeing that biblical characters in the Bible, prophets dealt with depression. They dealt with it shows the pain of loss. David's throughout the Psalms shares about um, he's crying out to God, and drowned his pillow with tears. And so, yeah, it's my faith has been first and foremost that which has kept me, and then the nurturing of loving people in my life. I come from a huggy, encouraging family, so that has always helped me. Um, Having positive role models, men role models such as coaches, even if they weren't the most spiritual, they were grounded in loving discipline. Uh, I remember there was also a school teacher in sixth grade, um, right during the time of either before, might have been before the tragedy happened with my brother and my father. He invited me to his house, and that's the first time I ever had spaghetti. But the teacher was showing love, and he didn't know I was being picked on in my neighborhood. He didn't know that my mother at the time was dealing with mental health issues, and so my faith, nurturing family members, and then persons outside of the family who showed me love um, helped me early on, and actually it helped me even going forth to some degree of knowing, being touched by that love early on. Um, uh, it was a lot of reserve that went forth when I went into adulthood from the love that was shown to me early on.
You know, I have a question for you. How did you reconcile with the family? Because I know that in terms of healing, you have to get to a point where you have to be willing to forgive and, you know, to accept the things that are happening to you and to make some thing. That's a primary stage in terms of moving forward. So tell me how you approach that issue in terms of your reconciliation.
Now, are you talking about reconciliation with the gay family
Yes, with the
or
family,
with,
with the family.
okay? So, whew, um, so with the immediate family, my Marvin, my father, Marvin Gaye Sr., Mrs. Gay had passed on. Frankie, Jean, Ziola, they pretty much were the ones who knew about me. People in the family, I came to find out didn't know about me. So for me, it was trying to reach out to about 2010, reaching out to um, my two sisters. One is deceased. As a matter of fact, I think today is the anniversary of my oldest sister's passing. But I was reaching out to them and not knowing if they were going to reject me or not.
Hmm.
That was a very tough thing. But in reaching out to them, um, uh, I was received. I was acknowledged first, which was a blessing. I didn't have to worry about any DNA test, even though anyone who looks at me can tell. Um, but um, but it was that in itself was a blessing just to be acknowledged by my two sisters that yes, you are, you're our brother, and then from there having some moments to talk to them because the tragedy. I met my father. I kind of talk about in the book. I only met my father one time, and during that time period, I was going through some tough times. My mother, due to mental health crisis, was taken away from me. And so then I met my father for the first time. And that affirmation from him was one of the most precious moments in my life. Um, and then later on, 6 months later, the tragedy happened and I never saw him again.
Hmm.
But reconciliation with my sisters and then other persons in the family, some nieces and nephews who didn't know about me, family in Kentucky that didn't know about me. It really blessed me and
Hmm.
strengthened me to be accepted, um, and no longer be a secret, and uh, and to feel that love from other family members who I didn't know about and they didn't know about me.
That's
And there's
very
still a healing
important.
process. Yeah, there's still a healing process going on. I'll just say, I'll leave it at this, that the tragedy really, to this day, has impacted the family to where it's negatively impacted the family.
A fixture of my childhood because when I grew up, I mean that's let's get it on. You know what? All of those were the soundtracks of my life. You know, and the way that I think he was probably the first person that did that, where he tied the social themes together, with the R&B. So it
Yes.
wasn't
And
just
remember,
silly love songs, it
oh,
was
oh,
songs that had
absolutely.
a meaning.
Yeah, my brother Marvin, truly was a genius in that aspect, and he couldn't separate. It was hard for him to separate his religious upbringing and tying it into um, kind of a mixture of the secular, the sacred, and the secular. But he definitely, especially with the "What's Going On" album, he touching on the different things that was impacting um, Americans of all types, but especially persons of color, Black Americans. And he wanted to touch the souls of men and speak to the ills and the things that was happening, whether it be uh, during the protests, the racism, which causes stress, the Vietnam Wars, coming back from Vietnam, who experienced STD, PSD, PTSD. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Um, those who and how many of them got addicted while they were over there, and
Yes.
then they come home and they're being spit upon. They're dealing with racism. Their jobs have been moved away, and here's a whole thing of heroin waiting them to try to numb the pain. And so Marvin, just in that "What's Going On" album, touched on all those things. And um, yeah, and of course, many know that he struggled with it, and so with drugs and depression and suicidal thoughts, and again dealing with trauma from his childhood and things that he experienced that he brought upon himself. And as you said earlier, the compounding problems, and of course in the Hollywood, the musical, uh, the life of the music industry, as we've all have seen, just looking at the shows Unsung, um, it takes a toll on people, and adds more problems, it appears, than to uh, solve. So yeah,
Yeah, even today, your brother's music is contemporary, because when I listen to the lyrics, only love can conquer hate, and
yes,
mercy,
yes,
mercy me, what
yes,
what's going
yes,
on? It's contemporary. I mean,
yes,
those
yes,
words are just as powerful and important now as they were, decades ago. You know,
absolutely, absolutely,
so it was most certainly a universal message, and that's one of the values I think of music, is that music is a universal way of expressing oneself, and it's something that
yes,
can be understood by anyone.
absolutely,
It's not tied to language. It's tied to the feeling and to the emotional. And he certainly had that connection to the
yes,
power and the force that was able to have his thoughts flow into the music
yes,
so freely so that people could
yes,
understand and attune and relate to them. That's the power
absolutely.
there.
Absolutely, and I still meet people when they see me. There have been people who have told me, "Man, you just don't know." Male, female, black, white, who have said, "Man, you don't know how your brother's music helped me in some of my darkest moments. You don't know how, um, you know, young men who were in Vietnam, who said, "Man, we played your brother's music a lot." The "What's Going On" album, and again, how I mean, sometimes people will start tearing up as they're talking to me. Just mention how, as you just said, how relevant they just felt like through his words and through the talent that God gave him, and through the lyrics, that man, someone understands what I'm going through. And of course, in a time, even like you said, that's relevant. We're dealing with um, the epidemic right now that's going on with drugs in our country, and the feeling of hopelessness, and how music can, if it's done the right way, it can touch people's hearts and give them hope, um, to maybe even rise out of bed to go to work that day, to not do something harmful to themselves or someone else. So, um, yeah, music done the right way can truly impact us. Um, yeah, it sets a mood. Music is powerful, and so yeah, it
So
can
I have a
definitely.
question for you. Do you have any musical talents or abilities, or has that been something that you've ever been interested in? Because you normally it's in the family, you know, and so I'm
Yes, yes.
curious.
Um, I've been told by a few in the past that if I ever sang, that they would definitely buy the record. Uh, th- I'm not Marvin, but there's some gifting definitely there. I'm definitely truly musically inclined to lyrics. So in my writing, just even how I wrote the book, um, I'm good at writing and visualizing things. And I think that's part of the gift that God gave me, just being saved as a minister. You know, being able to paint a picture, to preach in such a way, to teach in such a way, to expound things to where it persons can learn, hear, and be inspired, to be encouraged. And so I have a knack of doing that, and so I believe I have a little bit of that charisma. So
Okay, so I'm going to look forward to hearing more from you in that vein in the future. So I'd just like to remind our listeners that we are talking with Antwaun Gay, the brother of Marvin Gaye, and we're talking about his book, When a Man Exhales, a memoir from the brother of Marvin Gaye. Now, I understand that your book is available on Kindle and at Amazon. Can you tell me a little bit how people can find out more if they want to get this book and read about some of the insightful things that you have written there?
oh, they can definitely on Amazon. They can go to my website, antwaungay.com. And from there, they'll see some trailers. They'll see some speaking engagements that I've had throughout the U.S. And they will see, they can be able to contact me, connect with me on social media and see posts that I have put up and everything like that. And they'll be able to, I did have a cup.
Yeah, hold it
They'll
up.
be able
Let's take a
to,
look at it.
that's what the book looks like. And even the outside of the book, um, many persons ask me, why did I not show my face? Many people I felt knew what it's like to be in that position, to be sitting somewhere contemplating and dealing with whatever they're going through and feeling maybe hopeless. And the train, actually, to give a little story, while I was taking that picture, a train literally came by with that light. And for me, that represented, God sent that, and that it represented light and darkness, that there's hope. And you asked me a question. Actually, I don't want to take up too much, but you asked me a question, and I think about me writing the book. What kind of inspired me? I thought I was dying, and so it came out of me like a will and testament. It came as like as a diary in the form of a sermon and movie. But I thought I was leaving this earth, and and I touch on in the introduction, and all the pains and things that I had gone through in life, and all the whether it happened to me or whether I caused it. I thought I was leaving this earth with all this information bottled up, and my children wouldn't know, my grandchildren wouldn't know, my those friends and family who I thought would benefit from what God had given me to share with others was getting ready to leave with me. And again, I hadn't even met my two living siblings, Ziola and Jean at the time. And so that's what kind of inspired me to write it. I thought I was leaving this earth, and I wanted to leave some type of spiritual legacy to encourage, to warn, and help those who would read it.
Mhm. And as you know, our God, He works in very mysterious ways, and that was
Yes,
not
he
His
does.
intention. He knew that there were greater things for you to do that were going to come in the future,
Yeah,
most certainly.
yeah.
You know, one of the chapters that I was looking at, it's your chapter 5, and I was reading that, and it's called Life Lessons. Can you
Mm.
tell me some of those life lessons?
And again, if I can reflect back to that chapter, some of the life lessons that I definitely expressed, I learned early on. um, were, dealing with relationships. Part of it was how um, dealing with the opposite sex. Um, how as a young African American male um, who was picked on and was dealing with low self esteem, I learned how admiration from others through sports, through the opposite sex, just when I'm doing something good, whether it be singing, dancing, how it brought admiration. And when I saw the smile of others, it fed my self-esteem greatly. And now I wanted to do those things all the time. So I wanted to excel in sports, wanted to excel in dancing. And I ran after those things with reckless abandonment, um, to feed um, the hurt or the loneliness I felt inside of feeling less than. And then of course getting into relationships and all the different things that you that you learn in this boyfriend girlfriend thing as a young age, and the power of uh yeah lust, actually, more than love. And how that impacts the mind, how it impacts the emotions, and how that impacts your actions. And so so I believe in that chapter I touched on those type subjects.
Yeah,
And
and so ultimately what anybody finds when they look at those issues is that it's not the outside things that really make the
yes,
difference. It's what you
yes,
have inside of you,
yeah,
and
yes,
no one can make you feel good. You have to be able to make yourself feel good. And I know you learned that because I read that
yes,
those comments there. Even if you didn't express it in those terms. And see, that's one
yeah,
of the problems that we have. In our societies, everybody is looking for validation. For love and so
yes.
forth. But they don't realize that love and validation, it comes from you. You're the person that puts that out. You know what I'm saying? And when you have the proper mindset and the proper thought, then you
Hmm.
get the proper things that are needed to feed you and to nourish you. And
Well,
it's a basic concept of our universe.
for me, and my brother even described it, even in the What's Going On album, God is love. God is love. For me, learning that I was loved by my Creator, that there is no one that has my fingerprint, no one who has my voice print, no one has my eye print, either before, now, or after. That's how unique I am in every individual that is in the earth. That we are loved by our Creator, and that I am special, and that I have a part to give um, in the earth. I have a purpose. And so, and that, I kind of touched on again in the book that, I'm thinking that my identity was found in, playing basketball and sports and bringing it, trying to be famous, trying to be a star. How many of us grew up wanting to be someone famous that we saw on TV, whether it be an actor, singer, dancer, someone in entertainment, and that would be fulfilling? But God had to show me that no, that I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I have strengths and weaknesses just like anyone else, but that I am wonderfully and beautifully made, and that my value is not based on what I have or what I don't have, materially, economically. If I was raised on this side of the track or that side of the track, it doesn't matter. I'm a value. So that came through some sermons, I guess pretty much when I was about 17, 18, no, probably 19, 20, 19 or 20 years of age. And I started hearing some sermons that really caused me to realize, especially as a black male, that I'm more than just physically gifted to sing, dance, run, catch a football, or whatever. But no, I am smart, I'm intelligent, and that yeah, I can do far more than what I thought I could do, but it was in connection to my Creator. So for me, um, the love of first knowing my Creator, that Jesus loved me, and from there, I could now, love thy neighbor as you love thyself. And so first loving God, knowing God loves me, loving Him, properly loving myself, which means I'm not going to put myself in harm's way, and then I can properly love my neighbor. And so for
Yes.
me, that was the order.
That's a very powerful. And if anything comes out of this interview, this is something that I would like to get across to our readers. That that's a very important concept. And it's something that we face a lot. Especially with youth, and I deal with youth as well. Through my psychiatry, and I actually even put it as a hindrance to learning. So uh, many individuals have what's called low self esteem. And in order to bolster that low self esteem, it takes energy from what you can
Yes.
accomplish, what you can do, you know? And that's one of the reasons why, if you've ever noticed the youth, many of them will walk with a certain swagger, or they'll have to have a certain type of shoe, you know. And this
Yes.
is all
Yeah.
done not because the shoe is adding any benefit to them, but because it's bolstering their low level of self esteem.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that energy that they're putting into trying to bolster that self esteem, that's lost in terms of them being able to read, to write,
Yep.
to understand mathematics, and to be successful
Yes.
in their life.
Yes.
So one of the things that we learned with our programs, we would have rites of passage programs. We would tell people that they were important people and that they came from
Yes.
a line of kings and people of
Yes.
great, knowledge.
Yes.
Your life didn't start just with you. You have a history and a background, and it's a very
Yes.
important and a very relevant background. And once
Ab- ab-
people realize where they come from, then they can see where they're headed. And most certainly, it's grounded in God and in our
yes.
understanding of a divine being. No matter what our religion is, whether we are Muslim or whether we're Christian, the concept are basically the same. We believe in the universal, the one God, the only God, the true God, but whatever name we call him. We may have different ideals of what the prophet is or who is the messenger of God. But if you look at the underlying principles of all of the religions, if they are monotheism, they're very much the same. And so there are basically three things that I say that are needed for the salvation of man. One is that he knows what he believes in. And,
Mhm.
many times we don't know what it is that we believe in. We have these misguided, concepts. The other thing
Mhm.
is we should know what we ought to do. What is the right thing for us to do? That's very important. You have to have a
Yes.
sense of what's right, what's wrong. And those have to be principles that you're willing to fight and to die for, what it
Yes.
is that you
Yes.
want to do. It's belief, and it's what you should do.
Yes.
Actually, I think that this concept, it came from Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas, who was Catholic. Came up with
Philosopher.
this particular things on what we should do, what we should believe in, and so
Well,
there's another
well,
aspect to it, and it might
okay.
even be the most important aspect, and that is to know what we desire. How many
Okay.
people know that? What is it that you truly want? It's certainly not about sex or lust. That's not what you desire, because when you do that, you find yourself unfulfilled. And you
True.
say,
True.
oh, yeah, I thought this was going to be great or whatever, but now that I've had it, there's not that much to it. So, the three principles that are needed for the salvation of man: to know what you ought to do, to know what you ought to believe, and to know what you ought desire.
Doc, I would say it this way, and again, coming from a Christian worldview, and actually touching on some things that I definitely agree with you, um, and I touch on it in my book, and the readers will find it, where knowing your history, first knowing your creator, knowing your history, and for me, once I started seeing the influence of persons of color from Africa in the Bible, that right there in itself started changing how I saw myself, how I saw Christianity, seeing that the Bible was mostly written, lived out in the Middle East, in Africa and the Middle East. A man was created in the Fertile Crescent, and seeing Moses, a man of color, Abraham and David marrying Bathsheba, and Moses grew up in Egypt's court, and Paul being confused as an Egyptian. um, the first Christian church was in Antioch, and there was a prophet or teacher there who was called Niger. That in itself blew my mind, and helped me to see that as a male, as a Christian, that first of all, that I'm not an afterthought. That I am that prophets in the Bible were men of color. Um, that changed me, and as far as that self worth. And so I think in our country, I agree with you that it is important, especially for black youth, black and brown youth, to know that. It's really important for white youth to know that, but especially for black youth to know that they come from a lineage of kings. They come from an area, the ancestors where math and algebra and just high levels of math and science were, it come from indigenous Africa. And so, and the importance of reading. And so that, and the importance of the Gospels, of understanding that, um, uh, again, that I'm a man that is, I'm spirit, soul, and body. And that, yeah, I live in a world where it shows images on the TV going back to the 70s, 70s and 80s, even still today, not as much, where all the images of a black male, it was hard pressed to find one in a position of power. Being the principal, being the police officer, the police chief, being the president of the United States, being a senator or doctor, it was always related to something physical and not the mind. And thinking about angels, whenever I thought about an angel, I pictured a white angel, not a black angel. And so, again, I don't want to go too far into it, but I touch on those things in the book to address the fact that was some of the things that started changing me and awakening me to realize that I am, not to go by the Eurocentric uh, uh, description of myself as a black male, but to look through the scriptures and see who I really was, and not an Americanized version. If that, yeah. So I
Yeah.
agree with you on those
Yeah, yeah.
aspects.
Well, there were actually we did a study, so there was actually scientific data to support that. So we had a summer program, and most of these individuals are dead now. There was a Dr. Robinson, Ed Robinson. He was trying to get education, African or not uh, starting in America, because they would say that you started with Christopher Addicks or some stuff like that, and he said, "Oh no," he said, "we go back to the Songhai Empire," and so he
Yes.
wanted to get true African history into the schools in Philadelphia. So we had a program that was supported by the Private Industry Council, and we had two groups. We had one group that did traditional reading, writing, and math during the summer. And then we had another group that didn't do any of the reading, writing, and math in the traditional way.
Mm,
They read about the Songhai Empire. They had rites of passage programs. We made them put on uniforms that said they were a prince or a princess or a prince. And the interesting thing about that is when we did the test at the end of the year, the group that had the Songhai Empire training, they did better on reading,
hmm
writing, and math than the children that did the traditional reading, writing, and math. And that proved our hypothesis that learning is innate. Everyone has the ability to learn. You
Yes.
just have to
Yes.
be receptive to the knowledge.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And when you
Yes.
have this baggage, you're not receptive to innate learning, which is around us everywhere. Mathematics,
Yes.
music, science, it's all around us. All you have to
Yes.
do is recognize it and you learn it. It's
Absolutely.
really very
Absolutely.
interesting, this concept. So we were actually able to prove that in the study. and it was remarkable. I think we did finally get the African American history into the school system, but at that point, the schools I think were like 99%, African American anyway.
Yeah.
So I know you understand these issues.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding, knowing, it's hard. I was taught a long time ago, maybe 30 years ago, that through true history, that includes biblical history, African history, we can extract strengths, achievements, and direction from true history. And so, you give me a compass, but I don't know my purpose. I don't know where I'm at, and I don't know where I'm going. It does me no good.
Right.
And so those things are so important, to be done in the right way. And I think the fear, the lie that is being perpetrated in America, that if you teach young Black youth and white youth these truths, and then the lies that has been told over centuries, whether it be world history, whether it be in American history, that somehow is going to be detrimental to society. Kids are going to be guilty, and no, it's really something that would benefit the whole. It wouldn't make Black youth feel superior to anyone, but it would definitely raise up the importance of you know, you know, of my mental prowess of reading, of writing, of learning, knowing history, and your ability to achieve. But that's what oppression does. And again, I'm always coming from a biblical perspective. You'll see through the scriptures how things were done intentionally in a way to keep oppressed from having knowledge, from having of identity, of taking one's name, and yeah, it's just an interesting thing. So for me as a Christian, I'm praying that, and I'm praying with the influence that God has given me, that I encourage all Americans to, I think everyone should watch the Eyes on the Prize series. That should be something. Turn off the TV with Netflix and all the other stuff that's on there. We're blinded a lot of times to things that, again, build up false hope. It's distractions. Our children should be looking at Eyes on the Prize. They should be looking at the civil rights movement. They should be looking at the price that has been paid, and again, how young adults were used to make a difference in this country. It was spearheaded by youth, by the church, but most of them were in their early 20s. And so for them to see that, and I think there's a fear of that knowledge being shown to Black and white youth, because because a lot of them, they're the most diverse generation right now that we have growing up, and they're the most educated, and that knowledge of that they get, they're able to put the pieces together, and to see the lies that have been perpetrated over time and make a difference for other generations. So that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah.
Well, this is really something. So this is what we're trying to do here on this segment, and most certainly we want to encourage our listeners to sign up and look at this book. I think it's going to be a good read. I haven't finished it all, but I've gotten through many of the chapters, as you can see, and I found it a very interesting read. So once again, When a Man Excels, a memoir from the brother of Marvin Gaye. Would you, Antwaun, hold that book up again so our listeners could see it? I know that I found it on Kindle and on Amazon is where I found it, and you can go there and you can even download it in the digital format as well. Because a lot of the new people, they're not using the books anymore. they're going with the digital stuff.
Yeah. I'm learning. I'm learning fast.
So you can get it digitally and load it right onto your iPhone or onto your iPad or whatever you have. It's Android or iPad, and read it. It's certainly going to be a very interesting read. read. And so
Yes.
our time is starting to wind down. We've had a very interesting conversation. And I would just like to you note the fact that we learned information here and that this is going to have an impact on our lives and we're going to spread this information. I call it influencing the influencers. So
Yes.
I
Yes.
want the people that sign on to this to go and talk to other people and to influence their action. So one thing is I'm an optimist. So
Okay.
I believe that it's all going to work out, and we're going to have, peace. We're going to have understanding. We're going to have what was called for, by our Savior.
Okay.
Uh, it might not come today or tomorrow, but I believe in the power and the resilience of man. We're definitely going to learn how to live together and to have a more productive society. So thank you so much, Antwaun, for joining
Thank you.
me here
Thank
on
you
the
for having me.
Insightful Journal. And don't forget now to like and subscribe so that you
Yeah.
can become a member of our network and look forward to having future topics. Thank you so
I
much.
look forward. Thank you for having me. I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Okay, wonderful. How'd you like it? I think it was great.
Mr. Gay, Mr. Gay, I
Yes,
want to
sir.
thank you, sir. Man, that was awesome, and your insight was wow. I mean, you really made it. And I too, I read about the first half of the book, man, and I was in awe. And I want to appreciate it. We met you in Washington D.C. at the Congressional
Yes,
Black
sir.
Caucus, and I listened to you in some of the conversations you had there, and I was like, wow. Your life, man. And people think because you're born into that kind of family, oh, his life's going to be easy. But they don't realize that, man, you start,
Yeah.
you literally almost start behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, the thing is, the thing is, I didn't grow up. Oh, so let me say this first. First of all, if y'all are halfway through, oh my gosh, you get ready to go on a roller coaster ride. It gets more
Okay.
intense as it goes. So again, it's touch on the addiction, prison trauma that I experienced working as a correctional officer, uh, being unjustly dealt with in workplace, church hurt. I was part of a church split, and then the addiction and how that impacted my marriage, and and drove me down to some serious depression and anxiety. So yeah, you have y'all. You can just expect to go on a ride. And then the other thing is that I didn't grow up with the immediate family. I was born, uh, and then I was in that house a little bit, and then my mom met another gentleman, got married, and from I guess the age of from an infant, I guess 2, 3, at least 2 to 3 years of age, I lived away from the family and grew up in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So I didn't grow up. I didn't really even know things about my father till I was 40, as far as the issues between him and the children. That's how much of a secret it was kept on my mom's side of the family. It wasn't talked about. So I didn't even know my father's cross-dressing issues, the situation with the um, abuse with the children in the house and all. I knew nothing of that. Yeah. So even when the tragedy happened, that was the first time even knowing that my dad was a pastor, and I had no clue um, on why. I remember it startled me that much more hearing that he was a pastor. How could that? How? Why did he do it? And how could he do that? And again, I just suppressed those emotions. And my mom was at that moment was at a mental institution when that happened. So,
Wow.
so yeah, God has kept me. So again, all that, and that's why I guess maybe God has had me work with at-risk youth most of my life in prisons and jails, and um, yeah, because I know what it's like to to deal with family tragedy, to deal with being bullied, to being rejected. Um, yeah, man. While you're trying to figure out who you are. And then, of course, addiction that came at me at some point, with the pornography, which is that I didn't know is very similar as far as how the brain works, and then endorphins and things that are released being locked into that addiction. And
Okay.
so that
All right. So thank you so much. We got to go. We got another speaker
I'm
coming up
sorry.
on the line. So
I'm
we're going to
sorry.
have you back again. So thank you so much for spending time with
Thank
us.
you. Thank you for having me. God bless.
Okay. Great. I hope you got that last part because that was good.
Oh yeah.
That was
Dr. Robinson,
unscripted.
Always keep that record button
Yeah.
going.
I almost stopped the recording. And Shorty
That was the best part.
Shorty was like, no, always let it run because when they get when they get to open up a lot afterwards, when you ask, I say, yeah, boom, 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 boom. That was some of his best stuff.
That's right.
Okay, the other one, Dr. Doreen Davis is here. She's here.
Okay.
So I'll pull her up now.
Okay.
I'm pulling her up.